Today, we're about to explore the chilling stories of animal attacks caught on camera, from a travel vlogger who stood too close to the Zambezi's edge to a reckless handler who gambled his life on a black mamba's patience. But first, we begin on the forested outskirts of Bozeman, Montana, where one cabin vlogger's routine evening of filming turned into a nightmare. It was the evening of October 14th, 2016. On the quiet forested outskirts of Bozeman, Montana, where pine trees pressed close against scattered cabins, and the air carried the damp chill of early autumn. The sun had slipped behind the ridgeline, casting amber streaks across the deck of a modest single-story home just off a gravel road. The property bordered a stretch of woodland known as a seasonal wildlife corridor. That week, residents exchanged messages about a grizzly bear repeatedly raiding unsecured trash bins, growing bold and familiar with the scent of human food. Inside the cabin lived Sandy Scraw, a 34-year-old freelance graphic designer who had moved to Montana only months earlier in search of quiet, cheaper rent and scenery that fit her small vlog channel. With roughly 4,000 subscribers, she filmed soft, slow-paced videos about cabin routines and remote living. She had no background in wildlife and no understanding of how quickly the forest behind her home could turn hostile. Her outdoor trash containers were plastic, lidless, and often overflowing with meat scraps. Grease from her stovetop drifted through the kitchen vent on the evening breeze toward the tree line. That night, she had set up her camera on a small tripod near the counter, filming a casual cooking segment as dusk settled in. The grizzly bear is the largest and most powerful land predator in North America, capable of weighing over 800 pounds and reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Food-conditioned grizzlies, those that associate human dwellings with easy calories, are among the most dangerous animals a person can encounter. When strongly motivated by food, they may push into human structures, and typical residential barriers can fail quickly under force. The first sign came as a low scraping sound along the exterior wall. The camera continued recording as a massive shape appeared behind the sliding glass door. The grizzly lowered its head, pressing its snout to the frame, inhaling deeply. Then it rose, placing its weight against the glass. The wooden frame groaned but held for a moment. Sandy turned, frozen between the stove and counter, directly in line with the door and the scent pulling the animal forward. Without hesitation, the bear dropped its weight forward in a violent lunge. The glass shattered inward as the frame tore loose. The grizzly forced its head and shoulders through the opening, widening the gap with sheer mass. Sandy stepped back but hesitated, still positioned between the animal and the kitchen where the meat aromas were strongest. Her fatal mistake was remaining in that direct line, rather than retreating into a sealed interior room the moment the bear made contact with the door. As the grizzly pushed fully inside, the confined space and sudden proximity triggered a rapid, chaotic defensive reaction. A powerful forelimb swung in a short arc, striking her shoulder and upper chest with devastating force, claws opening deep lacerations and fracturing her collarbone. She was knocked sideways into the cabinets and collapsed onto the tile floor. In the same burst of movement, the bear's head dipped and snapped forward in a brief bite, clamping and releasing almost instantly. There was no clear sequence, only overlapping motion, driven by momentum, stress, and confusion. It continued forward, its weight crashing across her ribs as it forced through the narrow space. The camera was struck and knocked sideways, capturing only a blur of fur as the grizzly pushed deeper into the kitchen. By the time neighbors heard the commotion and contacted authorities, the bear was gone, slipping back into the tree line. Wildlife officials arrived within the hour, securing the scene and launching an investigation. Within days, teams located and euthanized the grizzly, confirming it was the same animal responsible for the trash raids that week. The community responded with shock and sorrow, neighbors leaving flowers along the gravel road, and online followers flooding her final videos with messages of grief. Sandy Scraw's story was a chilling lesson in how quickly a quiet home can become a hunting ground when food, scent, and carelessness align. But far from the pine forests of Montana, another creator, Lenny Trott, would chase a very different kind of shot along the banks of one of Africa's most unforgiving rivers, unaware that something ancient was already watching from just beneath the surface. It was the fading light of March 22, 2017, along a remote bend of the Zambezi River, where the water ran slow and wide beneath a sky bleeding orange into deep violet. The riverbank was soft with mud, pressed flat in places by the passage of hippos and buffalo during the night before, and the surrounding brush hummed with the quiet chorus of insects waking to the cooler evening air. The Zambezi, one of Africa's longest and most storied rivers, carved its way through Zambia and Zimbabwe with deceptive calm, its surface often smooth as polished glass. But beneath that mirrored stillness, lived one of the oldest and most efficient predators on Earth, watching, waiting, patient in a way few animals on the continent could match. On the bank that evening stood Lenny Trott, a 28-year-old travel vlogger who had built a modest following by capturing dramatic, low-angle sunset footage in remote corners of the world. He was known among his audience for placing his cameras dangerously close to the ground, sometimes inches from water, to achieve the cinematic shots that defined his channel. He had arrived in the region only days earlier, traveling light, filming alone, and following tips from locals about quiet stretches of river where the light hit the water just right at dusk. He had no prior experience in crocodile-active waters and no understanding of the subtle surface patterns that locals had learned to read since childhood. The area was widely documented as one of the highest density Nile crocodile habitats on the continent. The Nile crocodile is the largest freshwater predator in Africa, capable of exceeding 16 feet in length and weighing over 1,500 pounds. It is an ambush hunter of extraordinary precision, able to remain motionless for hours, with only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. Once it seizes prey, it employs a devastating technique known as the death roll, a violent rotational spin used to disorient, drown, and dismember. Dusk is the peak ambush window, the hour when crocodiles move closest to shore and strike with the highest success rate. The camera rolled steadily, framing the calm water as the last light painted the ripples gold. Lenny stepped closer to the edge, adjusting the angle, his boots sinking slightly into the soft mud at the waterline. A faint, unnatural ripple moved laterally just a few meters from the bank, a subtle displacement that cut against the current. He did not react. His focus remained on the viewfinder. His fatal mistake was standing directly at the water's edge within strike range, without elevation, without distance, and without recognizing the telltale pattern of an approaching predator. The crocodile surged upward in an explosive vertical strike, its jaws breaking the surface with a thunderous spray of water. The massive teeth clamped down across his lower torso and side, locking into his ribs and hip with crushing pressure that drove deep into tissue and compressed the body with immense force, capable of damaging bone, but not dependent on it. The force of the lunge knocked him off balance instantly, pulling him forward and down into the shallows before he could brace himself. The crocodile twisted violently, initiating a single death roll. Not a clean, controlled spin, but a chaotic burst of torque that wrenched the body off axis and dragged him beneath the surface in a spray of mud and water. Beneath the water, the crocodile maintained its grip and continued with irregular, forceful, wrenching motions rather than a deliberate second roll, angling the body deeper into the current. The surface broke intermittently, splashes erupting in uneven bursts as limbs struck water in weakening resistance. Crushing pressure, tearing forces, and rapid submersion dominated the damage, while water flooded the airway during each forced dip beneath the surface. The predator dragged him further from the bank, surfacing momentarily before submerging again, its powerful tail propelling the body toward deeper water. Movement became weaker with each passing second, as trauma, blood loss, and oxygen deprivation took full effect. The surface churned violently for several seconds before going still, the disturbance fading almost as quickly as it began. Lenny's camera was discovered the following day by a local fisherman who noticed the equipment abandoned on the muddy bank. Authorities launched a formal investigation, recovering the footage and reconstructing the sequence of events from the final frames. Wildlife officials confirmed the attack was consistent with a large territorial Nile crocodile known to patrol that stretch of river. His family released a brief statement expressing their heartbreak, and his online community flooded his final uploads with tributes warning other creators about chasing dramatic shots in unfamiliar waters. Lenny Trott's story was a grim reminder that some predators do not announce themselves, and that the calmest water often hides the oldest killers. But far from the muddy banks of the Zambezi, another traveler, Laura Draz, would find herself deep within the savannas of Kruger National Park, unaware that the gentle giant she had come to admire was carrying a storm inside it. It was the warm midday of July 9th, 2018, deep within the golden grasslands of Kruger National Park in northeastern South Africa, where the sun pressed down hard against the red earth, and the acacia trees cast thin shadows across the dusty road. The air shimmered with heat, thick with the smell of dry grass and distant rain that never quite arrived. Kruger, one of Africa's largest game reserves, stretched across nearly 2 million hectares of savanna, home to some of the most formidable elephant herds on the continent. It was a place of staggering beauty and quiet danger, where the rules between humans and wildlife were written in decades of hard-earned experience. Moving slowly along one of the park's narrow gravel tracks was a rented 4x4 carrying Laura Draz, a 41-year-old mother, on a long-anticipated self-drive safari with her husband and 2 teenage children. It was the family's first trip to Africa, a milestone vacation they had saved for nearly 2 years. Laura had mounted a small camera on the dashboard to capture the sightings for a private family vlog. The family had read the park guidelines, but, like many first-time visitors, underestimated how quickly a peaceful viewing could shift into something else entirely. Ahead of them on the road, a massive bull elephant stood broadside, its temporal glands streaming with dark secretions, the unmistakable sign of must, a hormonal state that renders male elephants aggressive and unpredictable. The African bush elephant is the largest land animal on Earth, capable of reaching heights of over 13 feet and weighing more than 6 tons. A bull in must experiences testosterone levels up to 60 times higher than normal, a condition that can turn even the calmest individual into one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. They are known to charge vehicles, sometimes striking or displacing them when provoked or confined, and press their full weight against perceived threats. Laura's husband slowed the vehicle, unsure whether to reverse or hold position. Behind them, 2 other cars had already closed the gap, limiting their ability to back away on the narrow track. The bull turned fully toward them, ears flared wide, head raised high. It performed a short mock charge, stopping abruptly just meters from the front bumper, kicking up a cloud of red dust. The engine remained idling. In that moment, it was not a single fatal mistake, but hesitation combined with limited escape options that kept them in place as the situation escalated. The elephant paused for only a few seconds before committing to a full charge. It accelerated with terrifying speed, closing the distance in 3 strides, and slammed its massive forehead into the front of the 4x4. The impact lifted the front tires clean off the ground, crumpling the hood and shattering the windshield. Within seconds, the bull angled its body and drove one tusk beneath the chassis, levering upward while shoving laterally. The shift in angle destabilized the vehicle, tipping it onto its side rather than flipping it through brute force. Windows exploded on impact, and the occupants were thrown violently against the interior. The attack remained brief but overwhelming. One more crushing push as the elephant leaned its weight into the overturned vehicle, buckling the roof and side panels before it abruptly disengaged and stepped back. Laura, seated on the side that made contact with the ground, was pinned against the interior frame as the vehicle buckled under sustained pressure. The compression caused severe blunt force trauma across her chest and abdomen, fracturing multiple ribs, collapsing one lung, and causing internal hemorrhaging. One tusk punctured through the side panel during the rollover, further collapsing the cabin space, leaving little room for survival. The entire encounter had unfolded in seconds. Park rangers arrived within the hour, extracting the surviving family members, while Laura was pronounced deceased at the scene. South African national parks launched a formal investigation, reviewing dashboard footage and eyewitness accounts from the vehicles behind. The bull was identified and monitored but not euthanized, as its behavior was consistent with natural must aggression. Her family issued a brief statement of grief, and the incident sparked widespread discussion across travel communities about the real dangers of self-drive safaris during must season. Laura Draz's story was a heartbreaking reminder that even the gentlest-looking giants can carry a storm beneath their calm exterior. But far from the dusty roads of Kruger, another traveler, Juancho Grent, would take to the water with friends in the channels of the Okavango Delta, unaware that the territory he was drifting into belonged to something far less forgiving than it appeared. It was the bright afternoon of May 3rd, 2015, deep within the winding waterways of the Okavango Delta in northern Botswana, where the channels cut through stretches of papyrus reeds and floating lily pads shimmered beneath a cloudless sky. The Delta, one of the largest inland water systems on the African continent, spread across nearly 15,000 square kilometers of flooded plains, a mosaic of shallow lagoons, hidden sandbanks, and narrow passages that twisted like veins through the bush. It was a place of extraordinary biodiversity, where elephants waded between islands, fish eagles cried from dead trees, and beneath the surface of every quiet channel lurked some of the most territorial animals in Africa. Gliding along one of those narrow passages was a small aluminum motorboat carrying Juancho Grent, a 37-year-old amateur wildlife filmmaker traveling with 3 close friends on a week-long adventure through the Delta. Juancho had organized the trip himself, renting the boat from a small outfitter in Maun and opting to skip hiring a local guide to save money. He was the self-appointed captain and cameraman of the group, filming from the rear as they pushed deeper into the reeds in search of wildlife footage. None of them had experience navigating hippo territory, and the channel they chose that afternoon was well known among local boatmen as a high-risk zone, a submerged corridor used daily by a resident pod. Dark shapes surfaced intermittently ahead, nostrils breaking the water in short exhales before sinking out of sight. The hippopotamus is one of the most dangerous animals in Africa, responsible for more human fatalities each year than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. Despite their bulky appearance, hippos can weigh over 3,000 pounds, run at speeds of nearly 20 miles per hour on land, and move with agility beneath the water. They are fiercely territorial in narrow channels where they feel cornered, and react aggressively to intrusions, most often targeting the vessel rather than a person. Juancho stood at the rear of the boat, camera raised, urging his friend at the throttle to push forward rather than turn back. A large hippo surfaced briefly behind them, then disappeared beneath the water in a smooth dive. Seconds later, a rolling wake formed beneath the stern, the water bulging upward as something enormous moved just below the surface. His fatal mistake was encouraging speed through the heart of the territory rather than retreating, and remaining standing and unstable at the rear of a small vessel in a zone he did not understand. The first impact came from below, directed at the boat itself. The hippo erupted upward with explosive force, its jaws opening wide as it breached beneath the back of the vessel. The massive teeth slammed into the stern, denting the aluminum frame and lifting the rear clear out of the water. The strike was not aimed at Juancho, but at the intrusion above it, yet the force of the collision threw him into the churning channel behind them. The vessel tilted violently, taking on water, and partially capsized as his friends were tossed aside. The hippo resurfaced immediately, its open mouth lunging toward the disturbance where Juancho struggled to right himself. A secondary strike came within seconds. Now reacting to movement and turbulence rather than selecting a target, the hippo's lower canines tore into his side and leg, inflicting deep injuries across his torso and limb. The impact dragged him partially beneath the surface before the animal surged forward again, in a chaotic, force-driven lunge rather than a precise bite. Additional blunt impacts from the hippo's head and body fractured his ribs and pelvis as it passed, and the turbulent water made any attempt to reach the overturned boat nearly impossible. The combination of crushing force and heavy trauma led to rapid blood loss, and with no stability in the current, his movements weakened within less than a minute. The hippo circled aggressively for several seconds before submerging and retreating into deeper water. His friends clung to the partially submerged boat and were eventually spotted by another vessel nearly an hour later. Botswana wildlife authorities confirmed the attack came from a resident territorial bull known to patrol that section of the channel. The animal was not pursued, as the behavior was classified as natural territorial defense. Juancho's family released a short message of grief, and the story circulated widely as a warning about navigating delta channels without local guides. Juancho Grent's story was a brutal reminder that in Africa, the most peaceful-looking water can hide the most aggressive defenders. But far from the reed-lined channels of the Okavango, another content creator, Drake Vrail, would step in front of his camera on the outskirts of Durban, unaware that the creature in front of him measured its patience in seconds, not minutes. It was the humid afternoon of August 18, 2017, on the outskirts of Durban, South Africa, where the subtropical coastal bush pressed close against the edges of rural properties, and the thick summer air hung heavy with the scent of damp grass and warm soil. The KwaZulu-Natal region was known for its rich biodiversity, its rolling sugarcane fields, and its dense populations of some of the most venomous snakes on the African continent. It was a landscape where farmers kept shovels by their doors, where children were taught from a young age to watch the ground, and where the warm months between November and March saw snake activity spike to dangerous levels. Even in August, the lingering heat drew serpents out of hiding, making them unusually active along the edges of bush and cleared land. On a modest property just beyond the city limits stood Drake Vrail, a 31-year-old aspiring wildlife content creator with a small online following of roughly 5,000 subscribers. Drake had built his brand around dramatic snake handling videos, often staging so-called rescue demonstrations in front of his camera, despite having no formal training in venomous reptile management. He owned no professional snake hooks, no tongs, no proper containment tubes, and kept no anti-venom on the premises. His nearest hospital stocked with polyvalent anti-venom was more than 40 minutes away by car, and he filmed alone, without a spotter, without a medical contact, and without any emergency response plan. On that particular afternoon, he had received a call from a neighbor about a large snake in a shed, and he had arrived with nothing more than his camera, a plastic bucket, and a short length of PVC pipe. The black mamba is widely considered the most feared snake in Africa, And with good reason. It is the longest venomous snake on the continent, capable of exceeding 14 feet in length, and one of the fastest, able to move at speeds of up to 12 miles per hour. Its venom is a potent cocktail of neurotoxins and cardiotoxins that can kill a grown man within 1 to 3 hours if left untreated. A single bite delivers enough venom to kill multiple adults, and the species is known for striking repeatedly when threatened, injecting large doses with each strike. Drake set up his camera on a small tripod and carefully drew the snake out of the shed using the PVC pipe. He then reached down with his bare hand and lifted the mamba by the middle of its body, raising it into frame as he began narrating for the camera. The snake immediately coiled back on itself, pulling its head into a tight S shape, its mouth opening slightly to reveal the characteristic inky black lining. His fatal mistake was holding the snake within strike range of its own body, without a hook, without distance, and without any backup present to assist in a medical emergency. The strike came in a blur. The mamba launched its head backward and sank its fangs into the soft tissue between his thumb and forefinger, holding for a brief moment before releasing and striking a second time against his inner wrist. Drake dropped the snake immediately, and it disappeared into the grass beside the shed. 2 small puncture wounds were visible on his hand, with only minimal external bleeding. He continued speaking to the camera, initially calm, still attempting to narrate the encounter. Within minutes, symptoms began to set in, progressing rapidly but unevenly. His eyelids started to droop, his speech began to slur, and a thin sheen of sweat broke across his forehead. The onset was not perfectly linear. Brief moments of clarity were followed by sudden waves of weakness as the neurotoxins took hold. He stumbled toward his vehicle but struggled to coordinate his movements, his hands trembling as he tried to dial for help. Within 40 minutes of the bite, muscle control in his limbs deteriorated rapidly. His breathing became shallow and labored as the neurotoxins progressively paralyzed the muscles responsible for respiration. He collapsed near the edge of the driveway, still partially conscious but unable to move or call out. Paralysis spread through his diaphragm, and without mechanical ventilation or anti-venom intervention, his respiratory function continued to decline. Full respiratory failure set in within an estimated 90 minutes to 2 hours, and cardiac arrest followed shortly after. His body was discovered that evening by the same neighbor who had originally called him. South African Emergency Services confirmed the cause of death as envenomation by a large black mamba, and wildlife authorities used his final recorded footage to piece together the sequence of events. His family released a brief statement expressing their sorrow, and the reptile handling community publicly criticized the growing trend of untrained creators handling deadly species for online views. Drake Vrale's story was a sobering reminder that some animals do not forgive even a single moment of carelessness. But far from the humid coast of Durban, another man, Angelo Plink, would step into the shadowed mangroves of the Sundarbans, unaware that something was already watching him from the stillness of the trees. It was the damp morning of November 2, 2018, deep within the mangrove forests of the Sundarbans, the vast delta along the India-Bangladesh border where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers meet the Bay of Bengal. The air hung heavy with brackish mud and decay, broken only by dripping water and distant bird calls. Spanning nearly 10,000 square kilometers, the Sundarbans is one of the last strongholds of the Bengal tiger, a dense maze of creeks and roots where sunlight barely reaches the ground. It is a place of both beauty and constant danger, where each year workers vanish into the shadows, taken by predators that move unseen. Wading through the shallow mud that morning was Angelo Plink, a 39-year-old mangrove wood collector who had spent nearly 2 decades working these waterways, supporting his family through the dangerous but necessary trade of harvesting timber and honey from the forest's edge. Unlike many of his fellow villagers, Angelo had recently begun filming short clips of his daily work on a cheap mobile phone, hoping to share the reality of his trade with a small online audience. That morning, he had entered one of the more remote zones of the forest alone, a decision his community strongly discouraged, and had chosen to leave behind the traditional rear-facing human mask that many local workers wore on the back of their heads to confuse stalking tigers. He carried only a machete, a shoulder bag, and his phone, which he held up periodically to film the winding creeks and twisted mangrove roots around him. The Bengal tiger is the largest cat in the Indian subcontinent and the apex predator of the Sundarbans, capable of reaching over 10 feet in length and weighing upwards of 500 pounds. Sundarbans tigers are uniquely adapted to their environment, strong swimmers, silent stalkers, and remarkably bold compared to their inland relatives. They are known to actively hunt humans, a behavior attributed to the region's scarcity of natural prey, the saline drinking water, and generations of exposure to passing fishermen and woodcutters. Their attacks are almost always ambushes, launched from behind and executed with devastating precision. Angelo moved slowly through the mud, phone raised, narrating the terrain in front of him. Behind him, the dense wall of mangrove roots remained perfectly still. A large tiger had been tracking his movements for several minutes, crouched low, advancing silently downwind through the root systems, matching its steps to the rhythm of his own. His fatal mistake was turning his back to the dense vegetation repeatedly, focusing entirely on the path ahead, without a guard mask, without a companion, and without the situational awareness that every seasoned worker in the Sundarbans relied on to survive. The tiger closed the final distance in a single explosive burst. It lunged from behind with its full body weight, slamming into his back and driving him face first into the thick mud. The impact alone fractured ribs and knocked the air from his lungs. Its jaws clamped around the back of his neck, the long canines sinking into soft tissue and locking onto the cervical vertebrae. Angelo's body reacted instinctively, his arms jerking and pushing weakly against the mud as he tried to lift himself, a brief, disoriented resistance under the crushing weight. The tiger adjusted its grip slightly, tightening its hold to cut off both airway and blood flow, while maintaining pressure as the struggle broke into uneven, fading movements. Angelo's arms continued a brief, desperate movement before going still, his phone still recording from where it had fallen a few feet away. The entire struggle unfolded rapidly, but not instantaneously, chaotic, uneven, and over within moments as oxygen deprivation and trauma took hold. Once movement had fully ceased, the tiger released its grip on the neck, repositioned its jaws around the upper torso, and began dragging the body backward through the mud toward the shadowed interior of the mangroves. The phone, half submerged in the muck, captured only glimpses of fur, splashing water, and the slow trail of disturbed earth before the lens went dark. Local forest patrols found his abandoned boat 2 days later, and a search team eventually recovered his mobile phone and partial remains deeper within the tiger's territory. Indian and Bangladeshi forest authorities launched a joint review, confirming the attack was consistent with a large, resident male tiger known to operate in that sector. The animal was not pursued, as such attacks fell within the natural behavior of the region's predators. His family and village mourned quietly, and the footage, once recovered, became a sobering cautionary tale shared across local safety campaigns, warning workers never to enter the forest alone.